Hey everybody, what's up? Hope you guys are doing good today. And time for another continuation in our series of seminars, tips, whatever you want to call it, on lure categories. And if you've been watching the last few days, we've been talking about lipless crankbaits in the pre-spawn. I've got one more I want to do on that, but I sort of want to break up the monotony a little bit and talk about something else today, which is the Megabass iSlide 262T glide bait. Is it worth the cost? So we're going to go into that in detail. But hey, before we get started, a couple different things I wanted to mention. Fish the Moment is starting a new YouTube channel called Fish the Moment Live. And we're going to be putting all of our podcasts, our live streams, and that type of stuff on the Fish the Moment Live YouTube channel. And on the traditional Fish the Moment YouTube channel, we're going to continue. Johnny's putting together lots of high quality videos, lots of really cool graphics, drones, all that type of stuff. It's going to be a really slick video presentation, like one time a week on a show that we're going to do on Fish the Moment, the regular YouTube channel. But if you get a chance, swing over and subscribe to Fish the Moment Live, and don't miss out on any of our podcasts, live stuff that we're going to do like that. So that's going to be one change that we're making. And also just wanted to remind you guys, like I said, I'm going to include the Tackle Warehouse Fish the Moment link in the description here, and also I'll put it in the comment section if you're interested in anything that we talk about here in the videos, or just want to help Fish the Moment out, if you want to help Johnny and I out, by ordering stuff that you do through Tackle Warehouse, by using that link, helps us out to get a real small percentage of the profits and helps us put all these videos out. So I appreciate that. So anyway, here we go. We're going to talk about the Big Mama, the biggest bait Megabass makes, the iSlide 262T glide bait. And the whole gist of today's seminar, is it worth the cost of this bait? This bait, here it is, the iSlide 262T. This bait right here cost almost $95 at Tackle Warehouse, $94, something like that. And we're going to go into detail, talk about, is it worth it? Is it worth to buy it? So first of all, let's talk a little bit about glide baits. Glide baits, they started out in California. All those giant bass you started seeing, 15, 20 years ago that were coming out of Clear Lake and some of the San Diego lakes and some of the Southern California lakes, a lot of those big ones were caught on these big custom-made glide baits like the 262. And it sort of became a niche type of a technique for California for those giant bass. But what happened is anglers started taking them back east and started, using them in waters probably on different parts of the country, and they started catching giant bass on them. And today, even to today, it probably remains the number one bait out there to catch not only double-digit bass, but huge bass. So is it worth it? Is it worth the investment of almost $100 to get this Megabass 262T glide bait? And I'm going to say right off the bat, yes, it's worth it. And I'm going to spend some time on this video explaining to you why. First of all, let's talk about why this bait is worth almost $100 and the investment for it. First of all, the construction of this bait is just, it's basically a work of art. The thing looks like a giant shiner, shad, some type of bait fish, whatever. The components on it are just top of the line, and the balance and the way this bait is tuned, the way it looks in the water, is something that just didn't happen by chance. It was a design element. The design process for the 262 took forever. It took just lots of trial and error. It took lots of prototypes. It took lots of work, a lot of feedback. There was a tremendous amount of man hours put into the design of this bait and testing it on top of the components that you have on there. And the thing about that is people say, man, I don't want to spend $100 on a bait. But you got to realize when you're fishing a glide bait, it's an open water bait. Yeah, you'll cast it sometimes around docks and targets and that type of stuff. But you're using this bait on a 7.5 or 8 foot rod with 25 pound test line at the minimum, fishing at open water. So you're simply not going to lose these things. The only way that you're going to lose one of these things is basically by getting it bit off by a muskie, or nailing it against a bridge piling and breaking the thing in two. So It's not a type of bait like a crankbait where you're going to get it hung up and lose the thing. This thing, you should be able to, once you make the investment in the 262, this is a bait that you ought to be able to keep for years and years and years. And the investment becomes smaller all the time because this is the type of bait you simply don't use. So as far as the standpoint of shelling out almost $100 for that, you need to sort of, rest in the fact that you're not going to lose this bait. It's going to be around for a long time. So let's talk about why you would want to buy this thing, first of all. The 262, it's sort of been one of those cult baits that has a cult following. And just to give you, and I want to talk a little bit about that, but I want to give you sort of a size comparison. The 262T, it's 10 inches long. This thing weighs 6 ounces. And here's a comparison with the Megabass Vision 110. So you can see how giant this thing is. This thing is a giant, giant bait. And I didn't know much about it really until I started, excuse me, I started seeing Oliver Nye. Oliver Nye is on the Megabass Pro staff, and he has a YouTube channel called Big Bass Dreams. Great channel. If you want to see the 262 in action catching big bass, go to Oliver Nye's channel, Big Bass Dreams, and he's got some videos showing this thing in action. But I started watching Oliver throw this thing, and it's like he'd go out there and he'd have these big rods, big line, big reels, and he's fishing for just 1 or 2 bites a day for this thing, throwing it all day long. But when he got bit on the thing, it was an absolute giant. And so I sort of started thinking, it's like, man, yeah, that's cool and everything if you want to go out and just throw a bait all day long to get 1 or 2 bites on it if you're in the right type of water. But in my mind, it's like I said, I don't know if this thing has much of a practical application in regular lakes. That changed a few years ago when Oliver went to they had a big bass bash up at Lake the Ozarks a few years ago up there. And Oliver went up there with Weston Yancey, and for 3 days, all he did, Weston and him did, they threw the 262 glide bait on Lake of the Ozarks. He winds up winning the thing. He catches one almost 7 pounds in the fall, which is a tough time at Lake of the Ozarks, wins $100,000 on this thing. And that opened my mind right off the bat. And I started talking to Weston a little bit, who fished with him, and Oliver lost one even bigger than that in the tournament that they didn't get in. And I think they threw it for like 2 or 3 days solid and got maybe 3 or 4 bites on it, but every one of them was a giant. So after that, I had a chance to visit with Oliver. I called him up. I said, give me a seminar on the 262T. I want to know how to fish this thing. And Oliver, he was basically saying about how much he fishes the thing and how he likes to fish it and how effective it is all over the place. And it really got me, opened up to the potential of this bait. So I started throwing it around the house here, Table Rock, Stockton, Lake of the Ozarks, and that type of stuff. And it's just like what Oliver laid out. And here's the thing about the 262 and these giant glide baits. They are big fish baits. They require a total commitment to fishing them all day long, and you're not going to get many bites, but the bites that you're going to get with them are going to be big ones. I spent 1 full day at Table Rock last fall throwing this thing, and I literally, from all day long, never took it out of my hand, and all day long I had 4 fish that followed this thing. Every one of them were big ones. They were all 4 to 6 pound fish, which is in the fall time of the year are big ones. And I did hook one about close to 5 pounds on the thing, and it jumped off. But I got 4 big bites on it, throwing it all day long. And the thing that this thing taught me, which is the great thing about the 262, is there's 2 different advantages to using this thing. It will show you if there's big bass in an area, because one of the things that Oliver really stressed when I talked to him is the fact that the big bass will show themselves on the 262. They may not bite it, but you can throw back in there with something else, like, it's a smaller bait, a wacky rig, something like that, and a lot of times catch those big ones that are following this thing. And if you get the right set of conditions, you're going to have these big ones eat this thing. Giant bass eat it. So what you have to ask yourself, what are the conditions for this thing? The conditions for the 262T these giant glide baits, there's two different scenarios that I figured out that they work good. You know, not only from my personal experience, but from talking to a lot of experts that throw these things that don't talk about it much. They don't want to get this information out. Excuse me. First one is in the pre-spawn. When that water temperature, you know, starts to get into the mid-50s and you have a big migration of those 4-pound plus bass moving up shallower to the bank, this is the first time that the big giant glide baits work. And you're basically fishing them around the same type of places that you would, you know, fish any other baits for big bass. If you're on highland reservoirs, you're fishing around, you know, channel swings, bluff ends, main lake and secondary points, all these staging areas for the big bass. If you're fishing, you know, down south where there's a lot of offshore grass, it's a great bait to throw in that any depth of grass over there. It could be 4 to 10 feet deep, because the 262T is a slow sinking bait, so you can actually count it down to whatever depth you want to and work it in that. And the thing that I always thought about this thing, I had a big question as far as water clarity on it, because since it is a big giant sight bait, you know, what is the best clarity? And after talking to Oliver, he assured me that he's caught big ones in it in 12 inches of visibility or 10 feet. So a lot of it doesn't really depend on the water clarity. It's just, you know, keeping it in your hand and throwing it. The key on this bait is this thing weighs 6 ounces. So you can't, if you put the thing on a flipping stick, I normally use that Megabass Alkali, you know, Roshi flipping stick for everything. It's a pretty heavy rod. You put this 6 ounce bait on a flipping stick and it feels like you're throwing a DD22 on a light action spinning rod. It's just simply, a flipping stick is not big enough for it. The rod I use is a super stiff, it's a Megabass, makes a rod called a Warhammer. Super stiff rod, almost 8 feet long. That's what you have to have. You got to have a super stiff rod with a long handle in order to be able to two-hand cast that out there. And again, you can watch some of Oliver's videos on his Big Bass Dreams channel. You can see him doing that. Also, on top of that, you need to use a little bit beefier reel, something that's got a little bit lower gear ratio, like a, you know, 5 to 1, 6.3 to 1, something like that. A large capacity line spool. 25-pound test fluorocarbon line is basically the best line on there. You don't want to use the braid. A lot of people, even though some people do, but since this bait's getting down in the water column a little bit, you know, and it's a bait the fish study, having that braid in the water is just going to give them a little bit more of a negative bite variable to have to deal with. So 25-pound test fluorocarbon line is the line you want to use on it. Big key on this thing is once you figure out the type of cover or structure you're wanting to fish this thing around, is you have to bomb this thing out a long way. You got to get the bait as far out there as you can get, simply because it gives it more time in the water. And the longer it's in the water, the longer it has to pull those fish up a distance. Because since this is a quiet bait, there's no rattles in it, you have to pull them up by sight. There's a little bit of water displacement in it. There's a huge noise when you hit the water. It's like hitting the water with a brick or something when it hits the water. And that's another reason you want to get that long cast out there, is to sort of let the area recuperate from the big splash from the bait. All the strikes that I have gotten on this bait, the days that I've fished it, have been when the bait gets fairly close to the boat where you can almost see the bait again. I haven't gotten many bites way out there, but not to say that you can't do that. But the key on working this thing is the eye slide. If you reel it straight, it has sort of a natural sway of like 18 to 24 inches. You know, it'll sort of go like this. It'll go and back like that, and back like that, and back like that. And you can catch fish on it like that, but the way that I like to fish it is like I'm fishing a big jerkbait. I'll throw it out there, and I'll just make long, sort of slow sweeps like that, and pause it like that. So the bait's going to the water, it'll go like that, stop, and it darts quicker like that. You know, if you reel it in, excuse me, I was trying to get over these allergies still. If you just reel it straight in, like the traditional S wave like that, you know, you just got more of a side to side like that. But if you jerk it like a jerk bait and make that thing dart, to me, that's when you trigger those fish into looking at the bait and actually biting the thing. So anyway, back to the thing, is the Megabass iSlide 262T worth $94, $95? Absolutely it is. There's going to be situations, I don't care where you're fishing in the lake, where you're fishing across the country, if you have bass that are over 2 pounds, because you can catch 2-pounders on this thing left and right. If you have bass that are over 2 pounds, if you've got water visibility between 12 inches to 10 feet, this is a bait that is going to, potentially add up to the biggest bass you've ever caught in your life. The thing about when you're fishing the 262 and these 10-inch glide baits is you can't go out there and say, well, I'm going to try it for, an hour and see how it works and put it down. The people that catch big ones on these big glide baits are the ones that's all they take with them. They have the big rod, they have the glide bait, and they go out and they throw it all day long. It's actually, it takes a shift of focus mentally to throw this thing all day, because you know that you're not going to get many bites on it. But also you know that you have a chance of catching a 10-pound bass or the biggest bass in the lake at any particular time with the thing. So anyway, like I said, $94 for this bait. You're not going to lose it. It's not like spending, $15 or $20 on a crankbait and getting hung up in a corner of a rock in 8 foot of water and busting it off. If you invest in the 262T, you're probably going to have this bait for, years and years and years. So it's something that's going to pay for itself. The only thing that does change on this is the tails on them. These tails are replaceable here, the soft plastic tails. So, sometimes they will deteriorate or get ate up by fish or something like that. But Megabass makes replacement tails that you can put in there, which is no big deal. Give it a try, guys. Like I said, this is something that, I'm still figuring it out as far as a niche in my arsenal. It's not anything that I have used to incorporate in my tournament game plan yet. Although there are some smaller Megabass glide baits that I do use in tournaments we'll talk about later. But not to say that I won't at some time. If I'm on the right lake at the right time and I've got a good limit of fish, yeah, I'm going to try this thing. But the main thing is I want to use this bait on days that are key in the pre-spawn and in the fall too. And I forgot to mention that earlier as far as the times. Yeah, the pre-spawn, we're talking about mid-50s, but also when this bait is key is in the mid to late fall, when that water temperature starts falling back into the 60s and 50s. That's when probably there's been more tournament success on the glide bait than anything. If you guys ever follow Carl Jacobson on the Elite Series, he's done really good on these big jerk baits in tournament competition. Oliver won the Big Bass Bash, I think it was October on this bait. So a lot of people throw the baits in the fall. Pre-spawn, mid to late fall are the 2 time of years you want to throw this thing. And give it a try. I mean, like I said, just save up for one. Spend a day throwing it all day long. If you get those conditions that are perfect, if you get those, rising barometric pressure, strong south wind, windy, cloudy days, the days when those big fish are aggressive in the pre-spawn in the fall, this is the time you want to throw this thing. So my analyzation in the thing with it, like I said, I think it's worth the money. I think it's worth at least having one in your tackle box. You don't have to have like a big selection of them, but it's definitely worth having one to throw it out there. The thing that was addictive to me when I was using the thing at Table Rock is that after you see those big ones following it, I mean, they get right behind it, 5 and 6 pounders, like within inches of the thing. When you see those big ones following this thing, that's what keeps you throwing this over and over and over again, even if the fish don't bite it, because you just think that eventually one of those big ones is going to get it, which they will. So that's the big advantage of it, and that's the advantage, or that's the deal with any big lures you throw. Anytime you're throwing these outsized, big, oversized lures, you're sacrificing bites for quality, and it requires a shift in your mentality to do that. And this is the ultimate shift in your mentality, throwing this big 262T glide bait by Megabass, 10 inches long, weighs 6 ounces. It's something else. I'm really fascinated by the thing, to tell you the truth on it. And another thing, if you guys ever talk to Oliver and I or watch his videos, I mean, he is passionate about this thing. I mean, he loves it, and he throws it. His are all beat up. He's got hook hanging marks on it and teeth marks all over it. So check out some of his stuff. I think you guys will really like some of his videos on it. Anyway, thanks again for subscribing, guys. Thanks again for following the channel. Like I said, if you're interested in any of these baits, please use the Fish the Moment Tackle Warehouse link here. That helps us out a lot. Appreciate that. And we'll be back tomorrow with another video. See you later.